morning, viewers. You are welcome to dailytrusttv.com live streaming. With us today is the Director of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, Ms. Idayat Hassan. She's a lawyer, she's a developmental activist, and human rights campaigner veteran. We are here today to discuss the sustainability of the nation's electoral and the sustainability of democracy. You are welcome on board.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are expecting our viewers, wherever they are, to set in their questions, observations, so that today's discourse will be rich and beneficial to the nation and citizens alike. The first on our program, as a kind of question, is to ask Ms. Idayat Hassan a view on the discourse on the order of election. The 2015 election have a peculiar pattern. The National Assembly are bringing in a new discourse into the whole debate on the order of election. So what's your view on the position of the National Assembly?
I think the sequence of election is generated a lot of discourse in Nigeria since 2010 during the amendment of the 2010 Electoral Act. The same was attempted, but it was quashed by the decision of the court, where it held that, of course, INEC has the power to manage elections in general. So this whole idea to infuse a new subsection 1 into the section 25 of the Electoral Act is not a welcome development, but we should really understand the thinking of the legislators while doing this. In previous elections, there has been a perceived bandwagon effect that whosoever, for instance, if the presidential elections comes first, it will affect the outcome of the governorship elections, because it's whosoever has won, the party that won in that election will definitely have impact on the voting pattern. So I think they are being guided by this to prevent a bandwagon effect. But when you make laws, you do not make laws for yourself. And this is very, very important, because we are talking in terms of an election management system which INEC is trying to perfect. They have actually released the timetable of elections. We already have a schedule, and they have a system where they are planning towards the achievement of this schedule. So you are kind of reversing what is already being planned. It's not enough that we might actually say that after all, it's just for them to push one back and it is 2 weeks, but also of what use will it be? It's not been proven. And since 1999 also, if you go back and see the way elections have been sequenced, it has not been regular. It's not certain that one election is being governorship. In fact, I think there was an election where you have both the governorship and the presidential election conducted together. Another one, it was National Assembly, State House of Assembly. So looking at that sequence from 1999 to 2015, of course, is very, very instructive. It's never been static. But what is important is of what use, and why should this actually be a priority at this point in time also. Then if something has already been decided by the court of law, why do we want to actually revert back to the same thing again?
So in this circumstance, many Nigerians were of the view that this issue of bandwagon effect, that many of the elected government, especially at the National Assembly, were not their favorite candidates, but they don't have option than to toe the line of those who are going to support the president. How did you see this?
I think that yes, it has a bandwagon effect, but we have not given so much thought to it. I think Nigerians in general, when you ask how people vote on different reasons and bases: primordial sentiment, ethnicity, religiosity, of course the new evolving stomach infrastructure. All these are to light in terms of it. And you also have to understand that the voting, the electoral geography in each of the geopolitical zones are completely different. So this is something they should even think in terms of, really. It's not who supports the president. So even the North, they vote for SAC. So SAC is whosoever is SAC now, from head to toe. But it's not all the time they also agree to vote for head to toe. Then the way they voted in some of the states, even in the Southwest, it differs. I think what the legislators should actually do, or politicians in general, is to convince Nigerians in terms of what they have on board, what they have on the table, what are they offering, and it's beyond campaign promises, but how actionable and the timeline. And even if you have worked very well, if you have actually delivered to your constituency, why should you actually be bothered which elections actually come first or last? Because you are sure and certain that you are going to get back, that you are going to be well rewarded.
All right, now, so we are moving to the next one on the issue of electronic voting. Nigerians have been voting manually, but the results are being transmitted electronically. Where does that place Nigeria in advancing its electoral activities?
I think electronic voting is, of course, it's something people have yearned for a lot, and diaspora voting. But the reality is that Africa is one of the continents, in fact, the only continent where technology has been most deployed in its elections. Even in the United States of America, there is nothing like electronic voting as at now. People either vote via post, whatever, they go there, but nobody actually votes electronically. Then again, how viable and how visible it is. We know the challenges we have in technology. While we should try as much as possible to use technology, we should not also be, we should take cognizance of the challenges that are actually attached to it. And we must actually study history and study cases from other countries. Now look at this use of electronic voting. The card reader has been introduced, and it's not as if we have even perfected it. Now we are talking in terms of how to make sure it works optimally, how it should be well stored, and all this. We have not perfected it. Then we don't even have good system in terms of the telecommunications. So these are challenging. But I think the biggest issue for us that we really have to interrogate is that of the transmission of results electronically. It is welcome development. It helps in terms of the credibility of the election result, and you can also understand that it is actually it's being brought about with, they are talking more in terms of this because of the fact that we have identified the collations process. That collation is where the credibility and the integrity of elections are most of the time thwarted, but also it has not been perfected. So what other mechanism will you actually be using doing electronic transmission of vote and know that the paper transmission is also sacrosanct? Kenya is still very, very alive in our memories.
Be that as it may, many Nigerians have argued that electronic voting will prevent electoral fraud, as we witnessed recently in the last election, council election in Kano State, where underage voters were seen completing multiple ballot papers. But with electronic voting, it seems to be like for one man, one vote. So how did you see that in relation to the...
I think, yes, it might be, but you see, voter education is very, very paramount. And the issue of Kano is not just synonymous with Kano. Look at it, has to do with the election management body itself and the system. So when you look at INEC conducts elections, and other people actually win elections. There has not been, look at all the off-circle elections that has been conducted. In Edo, of course, APC won in Edo. In Ekiti, in Ondo, APC won, but we have also seen in Anambra where ABGA actually won. The same with all the other constituency seats, federal constituency, to fill in the vacant position. But it's a different system when it comes to the state election management, independent electoral management bodies, which are actually handpicked by the governors. I think it's in the history of it since 1999. It's only in Kaduna State that a constituency, a small one, a local government or councillorship has been won by the opposition party. It is always outright. In fact, in Lagos, one time that the Obanikoro son even won one seat, just one councillorship or not chairman, the whole thing was actually twisted, thwarted, it went to court, and the same also happened in court. So there is a need to strengthen SEC. there is a need to make the system much more efficient and effective, because it also does not work that you go and tell INEC to actually conduct local government elections. The question you'll be raising if you ask INEC to be conducting this election is, we are already shouting that INEC is already overwhelmed in terms of its responsibilities, that it should actually be broken down. But beyond that also, think in terms of finances. What happens? Will the state now have to give finances to INEC to conduct these elections? Or will it be from source that the federal government will remove some of their money? Or the federal government will then have to adequately provide again for INEC? So the burden of financial resources itself, it's even making it almost practically impossible to ask INEC to conduct local government elections. So you should actually be talking more in terms of strengthening the State Independent Electoral Commission and rethinking voter education, particularly ahead of the 2019 elections.
So while waiting for our viewers, wherever they are, to send in their comments, questions and observations, your comment on strengthening the state electoral commissions has brought to forward some discourse, especially among the opposition parties. The general saying of he who the piper dictate the tune. How feasible is the independence of the state electoral commission to actually declare the votes as cast by the electorate, knowing the state governments were the ones that sponsor them and dictates how things will be?
I think personality matters, as we've seen in Nigeria also. We saw what Professor Jaga did. It was a difference from Maurice Sugu. We are seeing what Professor Yakub is also doing in INEC. These are very, very important, because you have to have, and don't forget they are also appointed by the presidency. So they could also afford to thwart the results of elections if they so wish. Then the issue of capacity is one of the biggest issues. So when we talk about election management bodies across Africa, there are two big issues, and those two big issues has to do with independence and of course capacity. So most of these state independent electoral commissions have got little or no capacity across the nation. So you even see that in some of the elections they just connive. It's just like opposition, that is the ruling party that is actually conducting the elections. They just come together and their own agents, the SEC are most likely to be the officials, the ad hoc staff. Then they start asking. I once monitored an election in Lagos then, where they were busy asking that, is this void vote? So you go and ask somebody that is supposed to be a party agent to validate for you if it is indeed a void vote or not. So what do you expect? So the challenges are so much, and until we can deal with capacity, until we can deal with independence, and of course the overbearing attitude, maybe in the constitution, this ongoing amendment, you have to take it away and make them very, very completely independent in terms of the appointment process, then in terms of the whole election management system itself. Because of course you can afford to be non-partisan, you can be, but there are different types of election management bodies. We could even start talking in terms of, at the state level, having people who are political parties representation, both ruling, both opposition. There are so many places that we can learn from. There are so many systems that we can actually learn from to make this work.
So one of our viewers, in person of Suleiman Kinde, was asking for your assessment on the electoral process in Nigeria so far since 1999 that we returned to democracy. And he was adding that, how, in your opinion, can we ensure that every vote counts rather than just mouthing it?
I think what is very, very important is that we have gone up, and there has been full of ups and downs. Really, you cannot compare what we had in 2007 to what we are actually enjoying today. In 2007, we were said to have conducted one of the worst elections in the world. And that election was described like it's shameful when you read most of the observer mission reports on the 2007 elections, really. But in 2011, we got a nod in terms of the improvement in the election management system and the credibility. Even though that itself was affected by the post-election violence where over 800 people died. But in terms of election management, it was okay. Then 2015 also was an improvement, of course. It had its challenges. There is nothing that is actually perfect. Because by the time we went to the governorship elections, it became zero-sum. It was crazy in most of the states, really. But, and very, very violent also, because we tend not to look at the issue of violence when we deal with elections. But it was good. We were applauded. Yes, we were applauded again, and we also saw that there was a shift where a ruling party was ousted and the opposition, of course, came into power. And we are looking on to 2019 to also see what will actually be happening. But vote counting goes beyond election management system. Now, for votes to count, of course, the citizens must be aware. They must protect their own mandates. And by following the vote does not only mean on election day. Following the vote is like that ballot I cast must lead to the delivery of development to me. It means better public goods and services. Because even the vote counts, if the vote counts, your candidate eventually emerge. But it did not deliver anything in terms of public goods and services while you voted in him and on the promises. So what is the vote? How has it counted?
Well, one of our viewers too, in person of Chinyere Adibe, is asking what are the things INEC need to do in 2019 to ensure that the gains recorded so far is not withdrawn but improved upon.
I think first and foremost is INEC will have to up its communication system. Like, communication is key. Communication. Because at times it's not like the body is not doing good work. They are doing extremely good work. But you understand that there is a low trust in systems or institutions, not just in Nigeria, but it's worldwide. All over now, there is what they call the trustometer. It goes around and it shows that even in all those advanced democracy, people do not trust anything that is actually called government or institution.
The transparency?
Yes, because of course there are lots of reasons why this is actually happening. So you can now just imagine in places like Nigeria, where even when things are transparent already, there is a perception that it cannot be transparent. People are already filling application and they are feeling that, oh, the election, the results, of course, they are bringing in their people, when the thing will definitely be. So because of that, we have to work harder in terms of communication, telling Nigerians what to expect, where there are challenges, coming forth to address them, and communicating in ways that they can actually understand and that reaches different level of the society. But importantly is also the issue of voter education. It is one of the key issues all actors must actually deal with ahead of these elections. Maybe if we are able to rethink what voter education is, maybe this stomach infrastructure thing will even reduce. People will vote better. Maybe people will go around to actually be thumb printing and doing underage voting. Will even understand if they are told from a religious perspective that what you are doing is sinful, and God will not encourage you if you are doing this because it is cheating.
Right. Sabiu Saleh is asking that beyond voting, what other ways can the electorate participate in the electoral process?
I think they can. Volunteerism is also key. So before we get to voting, we need people to volunteer, and because it saves cost and it also gives us a feeling of ownership to say, look, this government is actually ours. And when you look at the just concluded Liberia election, nothing defined the election more than the young people, but it was not the young people because they believe and they voted for a candidate, because there was a spirit of volunteerism and they showed it and they were able to keep peace through that. So we need people, for instance, to be pushing people to collect their PVC, to be pushing people to actually register, but beyond that, to be helping to control the numbers of the crowd at that without collecting money, because it's not at times that we do not want to encourage volunteerism, but people say they are volunteering, then they will go around and start collecting extra money and further creating problems in the whole system. Who are the people who will accompany ballots? But that's just one. Importantly, it is holding elected officials to account. They must be accountable, because the quality of citizenship will also determine the quality of governance. So if you vote and after you vote you have stayed in the sun for 5 hours or 10 hours at times, and after you have now voted, don't forget the PVs, the registrations, the CVR exercise that you have gone through with so much stress. Then the next thing, you just sit after you have voted, you go and sit in your house and say it is over. That is just the beginning.
Now, on the issue of the CVR, we still have challenges on the permanent voters card. Where did we get it wrong, and how can this be improved upon? Because without that, I think we have not even gotten anywhere.
I think the biggest challenge that is plaguing everybody at the moment is the continuous voters registration exercise. When you look at the continuous voters registration exercise, people have been complaining that they cannot get voters card in different parts of this country, not just in Abuja. Now, everywhere they go and queue. One, the staff are not enough. The processes are said to have already been influenced in places. I think one of my colleagues is actually monitoring the process in Kwara, and is telling us that even when you go there, they will tell you which party you belong to. Depending on the party you belong to, that is what will determine if you will even get registered.
With INEC officials?
Because there is always a connivance, really. So that is one. And of course, the processes, the machine. But what INEC has done is now that, for instance, in Abuja, they have said that they are bringing it away from AMAC. Because it means that AMAC now, my office is in Saithek. I live in Abuja. I have to go to Karu. And I might go to Karu for 1 week and not get registered. So they are going to all the local governments. So we have to also see this impact. We have to look at it in the next week to see how this has actually affected the processes, if positively or if it's still the same thing. Then again, you also have to understand that some of the challenges are not just the challenges of INEC. It's also costs you are talking about. It's not like people do not even want to have it in all the words, but look at the cost implication. But if we Nigerians take this to be our destiny, then we can start promoting volunteerism. We can have people who can be doing this registration and collecting nothing, or just taking a stipend. Or even in many countries, people decide to do it without being remunerated, and they do not skew the whole system.
Well, you are talking about volunteerism. With the level of poverty in the country, how do you think people who are working out to make ends meet now sacrifice their time to?
You see, the truth is that if we don't give, we will not get.
Wow.
This is the beginning of a process to make democracy to start delivering for us. Because you see now, you are going to tell me that I'm going to leave my job, or I don't have a job, then I'm going to work for this country. Then somebody gets elected at the end of the day, and that person does not deliver. He runs away, he does not come to his constituency. Now, the thing also, part of the challenge is also us. Somebody that is a legislator is not supposed to be building roads. He's not supposed to be saying he's going to give us a power in that area. He's supposed to make good laws. He's supposed to oversight the executive. The executive is supposed to deliver, and the judiciary and co must adjudicate when necessary, while the executive implements. It means that we will then start concentrating on the different arms of government. We will move to the NDAs. We will know that we are real stakeholders in this system, because for long Nigerians have stopped feeling like they are stakeholders in the democratic process itself.
As we are moving on in deepening democracy and making Nigeria to work for the betterment of all, Umar Khalifa is asking for your view on the not too young to run, and a particular bill that's been passed by somebody that's the not too young to run bill. So what's your assessment?
I think it's a welcome development, and now that there are 3 more states to go, It is hoped that it will be passed. Of course, 24 states we are on, then the president has sent to it. But that's just the beginning, really. It's not an end unto itself. Lowering age does not necessarily mean it will translate to power. Now, I did some work last year looking at all the countries in Africa, and of course in West Africa in particular. And out of all the countries in West Africa, all the countries, with the exception of Nigeria, and I think maybe Togo, they all have presidency at the age of youth age. In fact, Cape Verde has its own legislators at 18 years, and it's only Senegal and Burkina that has upper limits to their Senate to be like at 45. But the figure shows that at the end of the day, the average age of all the presidents is 60 point something. That's even on the continent. In fact, the whole of the continent, it is the Togo president and the one in DRC who are almost elected oligarchs, who are the youngest presidents.
So are we not going to say that
on
Africa is being run by old
people? And you see that we are also the youngest continent. In fact, the 10 youngest countries on earth are here on the African continent. But it does not correlate. So not too young to run is just the beginning. It's like the law has already been lowered. There is access. Then after access, people must negotiate and run for office.
All right. Before, as we are getting to the conclusion of this interesting session, the Constitution and Electoral Act amendment seems to be slow compared to what Nigerians expect. So in what area do you think the lawmakers can fast track this process so that we can have a ready footprint or springboard to balance the remaining process of the 2019 election to make it successful?
You see, in Nigeria, all this while, the amendment process has always been very, very slow. And it allows, one of the biggest challenges, it hinders the management of elections, because you know it is the law that these people, the INEC, and other stakeholders, even people that will do voter education, that will actually use to start planning for elections. But in 2010, you will even recollect that there were 2 amendments. Yeah, and it was one of the reasons why the election was pushed back until the December amendment, which came like 3 months into the whole elections. In fact, for the Electoral Act amendment, it was signed, I think, 26 March in 2015, 2 days to the elections. Of course, it was not used to conduct the elections. It's been a trajectory that at every point in time, people do not really, the legislators and of course the executive do not work timely towards amending the whole electoral laws and the constitution in accordance. But now this what they promised us actually was, for instance, Senate told us they were going to conclude everything by December, which hopefully I believe they did. Also, they had finished everything. No, we are still waiting for the report from the state houses of assembly on the constitution to arrive. Now, how many of them have voted? I think 28, but nobody has I think they've all not even submitted. What are they waiting for, really? Because until they submit, that is when we can start talking in terms of harmonization. But also, what is also important is that the way they build, they have also been very, very proactive and progressive in the way that this whole amendment process was done. So we should also credit them, because it is also in bills. So for instance, if the Not Young to Run comes now and it is done, then all they have to do is to have it signed, assented to by the president, then we can start using it to plan for the 2019 elections. But it is important, and you also understand that one of the biggest challenges we have is, must we always amend the constitution and the electoral act when it is time for elections?
So I think the lawmakers are also with us. Daily Trust is their favorite platform, both in print and online. Before we close the day for the day, former INEC chairman Professor Ataru Jega, recently at the program organized by the CDD by your office, lamented that Africa is not benefiting from democracy. Where is the link? Where is the missing link? And what should we do to make democracy work for us in Africa?
I think it starts with elections, but elections is just the beginning, really. what kind of leaders are we actually getting into office? Really? Because it seems when we also collect money, I want to relate it directly to what affects us. When we collect money to vote, how do you expect the people to also work? Politics is zero sum. Politics in Africa has been like, look, I'm here to actually gather and amass wealth for my own people. And when it continues that way, with the absence of institution, with the corruption that pervades the whole continent, it becomes very, very difficult for democracy to deliver for people. And that is why you see many people are even talking of argument. So there are different kinds of democracy. Now, on the continent, people are even focusing on the Rwandese and the Ethiopian form of democracy. That, yes, it's a democracy now, but you can see the level of economic growth. And not just economic growth that is not inclusive, but inclusive economic growth that is actually happening in those nations. But don't forget that in those nations, the issue of rights do not happen. So the thing we should be talking about is that, yes, we want economic growth, and we want economic growth that is actually inclusive, but that is not devoid of inclusion. It's not devoid of human rights, because human rights are fundamental. All the basic tenets that defines a democracy is what must actually be present on the table, and there is no other people, there is nobody that can do it more than us. So it is me, it is you, and it is all of us out there that can actually work towards making democracy to start delivering development to us
in Africa. I think I'm encouraged. I believe this to be possible. And lastly, your last word for INEC, which is seen as the arbiter for other people, including the politicians and the electorate.
I think for INEC, they are on the right path already, but they can actually do better. The serial exercise will go a long way in determining how much people will actually be participating in this election. It will go a long way to actually raise the confidence level of the citizens. So INEC has got a lot to do in terms of making immediately this serial process go on very, very well. Seamless, as a seamless exercise, as a pointer to what to expect in the 2019 elections, particularly when we are talking in terms of voter turnout, which we must actually be working towards, a high voter turnout, of course. And communication is very, very key. They are communicating, but they should continue to communicate better, because we are in the era of misinformation and disinformation, which will go a long way, not just in affecting our elections, but also our own democracy.
Dear viewers, thank you for being with us all this while. Here with us today is the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, Ms. Idayat Hassan. Hope you join us next when we bring in another personality to deepen democracy and national development. Thank you.
Thank you very much.